Hello, everybody. My name's Justine, and I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager. And I'm here with Matthew Lee, who has recently joined our staff BAME network. Would you like to introduce yourself, Matthew, to everybody?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Matthew Lee. I'm a lecturer in nursing and clinical link tutor for South Tyneside and Sunderland NHS Trust. And I'm an adult nurse by background, and I started with the university in October of last year.
So, as I said, we recently set up the Staff Black, Asian and Ethnic Minority Network, and you joined it. Would you like to share with everybody what was it that led you to becoming a member of that group, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. It started from some work that we were doing within the School of Nursing. But myself and one of my colleagues were quite interested in finding out more. And from my own experience, I'm from a mixed race background, but obviously I'm white presenting. So it was one of these things that I've always been interested in finding out more and joining the networks, but actually felt that potentially I couldn't. And it was a strange one. I remember when we had that discussion with you, I said, do I join as a member? Do I join as an ally? And it was
And it
quite
was
interesting what you
it
said.
yeah, it became a really interesting discussion. And I think I said to you at the time, well, how do you classify yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And just having that question put back to me in a really positive way, I was able to say, well, I am mixed. I always tick that box, that is me. It's just something that I haven't always been able to be as open with. And actually it's one of the first times that I've had that conversation in such a positive way. So that was quite nice to actually start with that.
Well, that's really good to hear. So maybe it'd be good then for you to share a little bit about yourself and your own personal history in terms of your connection to your ethnicity and race.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, it's mixed. I know a lot about my mum's side, which is the sort of white northeast side, but I don't know as much about my dad's side. It's quite limited, and that's kind of ties in with some of what we're talking about anyway. He grew up in quite a, a poor area in the northwest. He was in an area which was mixed in itself. It's quite predominantly Afro-Caribbean, British African mix now. It's quite a thriving area, but at the time he sort of walked this line because he particularly presented as not white but not black, and also he had features that people would maybe think he was North African. He kind of found this really quite difficult area where he wasn't really accepted by any particular group.
Mm.
And I know from his experience, he was almost um, he was really pushing to say, well, if you don't necessarily present as black or mixed race or anything like that, from his experience being so negative, um, he was almost pushing towards don't necessarily say because of his experiences. And the only experiences I've really seen of racism towards myself are times when I've been open about it and explained. I remember one example of when you go to tick the sort of ethnicity box, and I was in a hospital and I was ticking the box because it's really important because actually you can still have certain blood conditions and sort of hereditary issues. And the nurse came and said, "Have you ticked the right box?" And I said, "Yes." And then even with answering that one question, she said, "Are you sure?" Yes, I am
I'm
sure.
laughing, but actually, it's a really, really difficult experience.
No, I laugh at it now, and I mean that's a very minor case. There have been others that I won't go into, but yeah, absolutely. And it's something so simple as that, and you think, well, this is why, because you just get confronted with these issues. every time you donate blood, you have to tick that box, and then you have extra tests to see if you've got things like sickle cell anemia or anything presented. And that's always been fantastic. It's always just been, yeah, we'll give you this extra test, no problem at all. And I would say it's the minority, but it's just those experiences which make you less likely to do what you actually want to do. And I think something that's been quite interesting for me is because I present as white, I've seen what I would call a sort of covert racism, which is that racism which happens behind closed doors. So you can have someone who is obviously from a BAME background in the room, nothing will be said, and when they leave the room, something is said, not necessarily about them, but just in generally that people know wouldn't be acceptable. And it's been that interesting part of I've sort of, because I've been in that room, I've often challenged and trying to promote positive conversation and try and sort of have that discussion about what's appropriate and what's not. And sometimes it's recognizing that I can have that discussion because people aren't always aware of my background. It's that really difficult one. So then if you say, then you almost lose that ability to have those discussions. It's a really strange one. So again, I've been walking a line as my dad did, but from a very different point of view, because a lot of my characteristics that I would have from that background are more hidden, aren't as obvious.
So you were saying there that you are in a sort of oddly unique position where you're white presenting, people perceive you as being white, but you sometimes feel that that gives you a different ability to challenge others. Is that what you mean? In that, do you
Yeah.
think people are more accepting because they think you're white when you challenge those microaggressions that you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it it shouldn't at all, but it does kind of provide a platform almost. And I'm acutely aware of, of certain things like, when you talk about white privilege and what that actually means, and actually seeing that firsthand is that I've seen it where I've almost lost that ability to have those conversations as people have found out that basically
Mhm.
what would happen is I would be that person that I would leave the room and the conversations would then happen once I've left.
Mm,
Um, or it would mean that I wouldn't necessarily be aware of them. And I think it would be naive to think that they've gone away,
mm,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
So it's a strange one. But then you're sort of wrestling with the thoughts of, should you just be very open from the start and then people have to just deal with you as they would anyone else? Because actually, I talk about the sort of door, the open door and closed door, people leaving the room and not. And actually, we should be able to have conversations which aren't, in my opinion, particularly, that aren't against or negative to anyone else. You should be able to have those same conversations with people in the room or not. And that's what we should be striving for, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you feel as though you've got this very unique situation of experience, almost white privilege when people think that you're white, but that then when you are open and authentic, it actually means that the conversation is received in a quite a different way when you challenge people.
Yeah, the conversation actually dries up
Mm,
quite quickly, and what would happen is the those that are interested would absolutely engage and talk about that, see what that means, and that would be
yeah.
quite positive. But those that weren't would just basically either not talk as freely or would not talk about those same issues until I wasn't present.
Mm,
Because I think we're all aware of, sometimes what happens when we leave certain rooms, what might be said.
mm,
And especially with open doors, you can hear what's happening as
yeah.
soon as you leave. But yeah, it's a strange one, and it's one that, like I said, there may be others that are sort of juggling with this sort of position. Where do they fit in with things? And actually, that's something that was really quite interesting about joining the BAME network is seeing if there's anyone else in this situation,
Mm.
and actually just having these conversations.
Yeah. So it sounds as though you've joined the network to develop a sort of higher level of authenticity and openness about yourself, and you felt comfortable within that environment to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's definitely been a bit of a journey for me. And it's not necessarily that in other workplaces I haven't always felt comfortable. It's just that I feel especially comfortable in this environment to have this openness and have these discussions. And I think that's all I would like for anyone, including myself.
And is there anything else that you'd like to get people to reflect on as a result of this, you sharing this conversation, Matthew?
I think It's, I think it's become quite commonplace for us to be aware that things like mental health issues, disabilities, might not always present, so we should always be aware. But I think it should be the same for ethnicity, is that we don't know where people are from originally, where their parents or grandparents are from, and so on. And actually, I think we just need to be more aware that actually there can be these almost hidden traits, and just treat people with respect. I think that's the main thing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Thank you.